Oscar 3-2, this is Oscar 3-9, Mr. Jogo.
In the aftermath of the 1998 to 2000 armed conflict are allegations and counter-allegations of serious human rights violations by both Ethiopia and Eritrea against each other. Conscious of the plight of the vulnerable populations affected by the conflict in both countries, particularly those living in sensitive border areas, UNMI's human rights component was included in UNMI's mandate at the very beginning of the mission. UNMI's chief human rights officer reflects on issues of concern to his office.
The mandate here was not fully reflecting the overall classical human rights mandate as it should be in every peacekeeping operation, taking into account, first of all, the monitoring side, the investigation portion, the capacity building initiative, the human rights promotional activities, and more so the support or strengthening to the national human rights institutions. So even though such aspects were missing at the beginning, we then have to implement within UNMI a very narrow human rights mandate, confining our operation in a very limited geographical scope, which means the TZ and adjacent area. So as you could see, this is one of the major challenges for us.
The period from December 2002 through to the present raises a number of interesting challenges for the work of human rights officers in the mission area as they continue to systematically assess and address possible human rights violations committed by both countries. Border crossings, especially by minors, cattle rustling, repatriation of people who inadvertently cross the border from either country are all part of their job as the road to demarcation moves further into the distance. The welfare of refugees and internally displaced people remain on the top of the agenda of the UNMI human rights officers who regularly visit displaced families in camps such as this one, situated in Shambiko.
We are in Shambiko IDP's camp. Now, this is a camp populated by 668 families, and the majority of the heads of these families are women. The population goes to 2,394. We are concerned about the IDP camps because we follow or we monitor the human rights situation of these IDP camps, and we would also want to know their humanitarian conditions. So as we are here today, we are in the company of one of the community leaders, Hailap Kiflai, and he has given us, I think, sufficient information about the needs of these camps and about the necessary details that we would also want to know about this camp.
We don't have enough primary schools, and we presently share facilities with the school in Shambiko. For our children under the age of 5 years, we use makeshift tents as classrooms.
The purpose of today's visit in particular is also to try to connect the needs of those people to the quick impact projects that UNMI sometimes implement. So this is a camp that has not benefited from any of the projects yet, and we would start by explaining to the leaders of this community how they could develop a concrete project in collaboration with the local administrators so that they present such a project to the necessary committees in UNMI for consideration.
Other concerns of the office include preparing the border populations for understanding and implementing various human rights instruments that protect a number of their rights under their local laws. As the Human Rights Office looks at the road ahead, its officers see a lot more work on the ground with the populations of both countries, if the path to demarcation is to be a smooth one.
The work that we have been doing so far, it's simply, as part of the mandate stipulate, to monitor, to investigate, to report, and also to advocate how we can, on a day-to-day basis, assist those who are in need. How can we, on the human rights point of view, be able to advocate or to give a voice to those women who did not have a voice, taking into account the present stalemate? It's something extremely important for which the human rights section cannot be staying without forcefully advocating.
While other areas of UNMI's work on the ground continues fairly smoothly, the years 2002 and 2003 see a build-up of tension between Ethiopia and Eritrea.
This is a child from Eritrea drew this, and all the paintings are on peace.
This has an impact on the public information activities of UNMI, which are being carried out in a progressively difficult media environment. Though the quest of the local people on both sides of the border for peace and demarcation remains very real, their understanding of the role of UNMI in the peace process is hindered by a lack of access to information about the mission. Getting the UNMI message across to the public in a controlled media environment continues to be a challenge in 2003 and more so in 2004, especially in one of the host countries. Opened in 2002, the UNMI outreach centres represent important outlets for information on the developments in the peace process. People on both sides of the border flock to the centres for months and are pleased that they can access first-hand information on the peace process and the UN in general. However, in September 2003, the closure of the 2 outreach centres in Eritrea deals a major blow to UNMI's outreach activities.
Well, I think it was very unfortunate and a very sad day when the outreach centers in Asmara and Barentu closed, because a great deal of work went into putting these centers together. And what was really heartwarming was to see the reaction from the public. They were so happy to come into those centers, to look at the information, to get first-hand information on UNMI. And I think in a way, for the first time, to see who we were as UNMI. And we just felt it was really unfortunate to see the months of work that we put in to put those centers together just go down the tubes.
Osman Lahai was the coordinator for the Asmara Outreach Centre prior to its closure, and he recalls how popular the centres were, particularly with the Eritrean youth.
Few weeks after we opened the outreach centre, it became very popular, particularly among city youths. Because basically what we were doing was we were screening videos that were translated into Tigrinya. We were showing photos they can understand. We also had reading materials that we gave out, like the Universal Declaration of the Human Rights. That one was translated into Tigrinya. So you look at it, it was very, very friendly.
Meanwhile, the outreach centres on the Ethiopian side of the border continue to thrive, with the opening of the Adigrat Centre in October 2004 being a major highlight.
As many of you are aware, the purpose of the outreach center is to give the public in Ethiopia and Eritrea access to credible and easily accessible information on UNMI activities in support of the peace process in particular, and on the United Nations and its work in general.
Since this time, UNMI has relied on its radio programmes, the weekly press briefings, the outreach centres on the Ethiopian side, and other joint initiatives with interested partners in the peace process to explain the mission's mandate and UNMI's specific role in the demarcation process to the public. An interesting experience is the December 2004 launching of the Next Steps to Peace documentary in Addis Ababa. The event provokes an exchange of views on the peace process by members of the Ethiopian public and creates a new understanding of the work of the mission.
If that border is agreed to, if there is peace then, what would happen to both countries? What would happen to their economies? What would happen to officials, workers that are involved in the process?
You will realize from the film that UAE has demonstrated its commitment to keeping the ceasefire and ensuring that the peace process remains firmly on track.
This is followed in January 2005 by the holding of the first ever children's art exhibition in Addis Ababa at the Russian embassy, showing the paintings of both Ethiopian and Eritrean children who express their wish for peace and reconciliation through their work. The response from all who view it is tremendous.
This exhibit could not have come at a more opportune time, as rumors of impending war, mostly spread by the newspapers, abound in both countries. To the many teachers and administrators who helped organize the competition, especially in the border areas of both countries, we expressed our very deep gratitude. And of course, our most sincere gratitude goes to the hundreds of children who took time out of their holidays to participate and to put on paper such wonderful creative interpretations of what peace and reconciliation mean to them. That is, what peace and reconciliation mean to the children of Ethiopia and Eritrea.
As the stalemate continues, the UNMI Public Information Office will have to find new and innovative ways to meet the information needs of the people of Ethiopia and Eritrea, particularly the vulnerable populations along the border areas where demarcation will take place.
We're trying in every which way that we can through our newsletter, and now our newsletter is in Tigrinya, which is the language most people speak here. We're trying to get the message out that way. We have also tried to use our UNMOs who are in various parts of this country where we would not normally be, those of us who are headquarters based, and they have contact with people with whom we wouldn't be in contact, and therefore they have been taking the message themselves with our newsletter to far-flung places. We have just received our mobile video unit, and our hope is to make use of that. And don't forget, we have our radio programs which are on air in Eritrea once a week, and of course on shortwave twice a week. So there are opportunities to be heard in Eritrea and in Ethiopia.
As the year 2004 dawns, there's growing concern about the deepening stalemate by the leadership in UNMI, members of the international community, and in particular the people of both countries. Constant communication between the special representative of the Secretary-General and the leadership of both nations takes on greater significance, though very little appears to be achieved. On the 30th of January 2004, the UN Secretary-General, to assist the efforts of the SRSG on the ground, appoints former Canadian Foreign Minister Lloyd Axworthy as his special envoy to assist in finding ways to break the impasse in the peace process. While Ethiopia welcomes the appointment of the special envoy, Eritrea refuses to meet with him, fearing this is going to be part of an alternative mechanism suggested by Ethiopia in Prime Minister Meles Zenawi's letter of September 2003 to the United Nations Secretary-General as part of the way forward and out of the stalemate. Among the efforts made by the international community to break the impasse is the intervention of the European Union Troika. Led by the Irish Minister of Foreign Affairs, Brian Cohen, a European Union delegation visits the region in April 2004. At a press conference held at the Intercontinental Hotel in Asmara, the Irish Foreign Minister and head of the European delegation declares the EU's readiness to help the parties implement the Boundary Commission's decision.
When we spoke with the President, we reiterated the well-known EU position that the decision of the Boundary Commission is final and binding and should be implemented fully and without delay.
This is followed in July 2004 by a visit from the UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan, his second to Eritrea since the mission was established. Many expect his visit to give the peace process a much-needed boost, but this is not to be. The visit, however, provides a good opportunity for religious leaders and representatives of the NGO community to discuss the peace process with the UN Secretary-General.
We are absolutely saying that the Secretary-General has failed until now to take appropriate measures to uphold international law. The Algiers Agreement has clear mechanisms to ensure that the border is demarcated. It's a final and binding decision, and the UN has a mandate and a charter which is designed to uphold international law by a series of measures which may be taken and must be taken.
Peacekeeping is enough if both parties intend to maintain peace. But if one side intends to maintain a state of harassment, then peacekeeping is not enough.
Following his trip, there's a subsequent exchange of correspondence between the UN Secretary-General and the leadership of both countries, which clearly demonstrates how polarised the situation between Ethiopia and Eritrea has become. In November 2004, Ethiopia's Prime Minister puts forward a 5-point peace plan to the Ethiopian Parliament, by which it agrees to accept the decision of the Boundary Commission in principle, pay its dues to the Commission, and appoint its field liaison officers. Many political observers see this as a sign of progress. Others are a little more sceptical and believe that nothing much has been accomplished, as all that was agreed to by Ethiopia was expected under the agreements it had signed with Eritrea and several UN Security Council resolutions. Ethiopia, in its 5-point peace plan, calls for dialogue with Eritrea to move the process forward, but its hopes for a positive response from its neighbour are short-lived, as Eritrea rejects the proposal, noting that it would be willing to hold dialogue with Ethiopia only when demarcation of the border has taken place. UNMI, now facing a serious deadlock, turns to the international community and the friends of UNMI to persuade both Ethiopia and Eritrea that it's in their interests to find a solution to the impasse and move ahead on the road to demarcation. The Security Council issues 4 resolutions between 2003 and 2004, but by September 2004, as the mandate of UNMI is renewed, the Council decides that it must send a clear message to both parties that it cannot continue to keep UNMI at its current strength and expense to the peacekeeping budget with no tangible results on the ground. The UN Secretary-General, in his progress report of the 7th of March 2005, recommends a reconfiguration of the UNMI force. For the head of the UNMI, SRSG Legwaila Joseph Lekwaila, this creates some concern.
What I fear is that the longer this stalemate persists and there is no sign that the process might be successful very soon, you will have another review. People will come here and review the operations of UNMI and reconfigure again. And that is a slippery slope towards maybe diminishing the mission so radically that it becomes a token presence by the United Nations in this country, which would be terribly unfortunate.
Our assessments are of the situation. Generally, the situation is calm and stable, despite the ongoing redeployment and reorganization of EAF units closer to the border.
By December 2004, Ethiopia informs UNMI that it intends to move a larger number of its troops 20 to 40 kilometres inside Ethiopian territory as a defensive measure, an act that Eritrea immediately views as provocative. The deadlock continues, despite calls on both sides for progress to be made. But this cannot go on forever. If peace between these two neighbouring countries is ever to return, dialogue is the key. With renewed commitment and vigour from the governments of Ethiopia and Eritrea, the international community and UNMI, the ultimate goal of demarcation can be attained.
I think it is high time for us to move with a view to completing the process we started in 2000 and completing it successfully. In other words, completing the final phase of the process, which is the demarcation of the border. Witnessing the planting of the last pillar so that the United Nations can terminate the mission here. Gratified that we have succeeded in helping Ethiopia and Eritrea solve the problem that they have invited us here to solve.